In 1922, when Egyptologist Howard Carter opened Tutankhamun's tomb, he found something unexpected inside. The honey was edible, not as a relic, as food, with no trace of spoilage, no smell of decay, no mold. This isn't a legend or an exaggeration. It's a documented fact from the expedition's own records. Behind that jar of honey in your kitchen stands a creature whose history is longer than the history of flowers, dinosaurs in their prime, and almost any other living organism on this planet. A creature that flies like a courier, counts, senses electric fields, votes, plays, anticipates earthquakes, and has outsmarted millions of years of evolution, creating the only product in nature that never spoils. 100 facts about the bee, some of them will change how you see this world. Fact 1. The honeybee has existed on Earth for about 100 million years. For comparison, humans as a species appeared roughly 300,000 years ago. That means the bee is over 300 times older than us. When the last non-avian dinosaurs walked the Earth, the bee was already flying, collecting nectar, and building honeycombs. It survived every mass extinction, except one that hasn't happened yet. Fact 2. There are over 20,000 species of bees worldwide. The honeybee is just one of them. When most people hear the word bee, they picture one specific buzzing creature with black and yellow stripes. In reality, it's a whole world. Carpenter bees, leafcutter bees, mason bees, bees the size of ants, and bees the size of a thumbnail. Fact 3. Most of those 20,000 species are solitary. They don't live in hives, don't make honey, and almost never sting without an obvious reason. Hives, colonies, swarms. That's the exception to the rule, not the norm. Social life in the bee world is a rare and highly complex anomaly. Fact 4. A worker bee in a hive is always female. The males, drones, don't work at all. They have no stinger, they don't collect nectar, they don't build honeycomb, they don't guard the entrance. Their only biological job is to mate with the queen. All other times they eat the stores that others gathered. But their fate, more on that later. It's not pretty. Fact 5. In its entire lifetime, one worker bee produces 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. That's right, 1/12. To fill a standard jar weighing 450 grams, it takes roughly 50,000 foraging flights. Every time you scoop honey with a spoon, behind it are hundreds of thousands of kilometers of flight and millions of flower visits. Fact 6. A worker bee lives about 6 weeks in summer, in winter, up to 6 months. The difference is enormous, and the explanation is simple. In summer, the bee literally wears itself out. It flies, carries loads, processes nectar, builds comb, non-stop, no days off, until complete physical exhaustion. In winter, there's no workload, so the bee just waits. Fact 7. A bee dies in flight. Not in the hive, not in its sleep. Right in the air, when its wings can no longer take the strain. This isn't a metaphor or a pretty image. It's a documented biological fact. Worn-out wings simply stop working, and the bee falls where it was flying. It doesn't return home to die. It works until the very last beat. Fact 8. In 1 second, a worker bee's wings make about 230 beats. That exact frequency creates the buzzing sound we hear. But here's the interesting part. A loaded bee buzzes differently than an empty one. The beat frequency changes depending on the weight of the load. An experienced beekeeper can tell the sound of an empty bee from a full one by ear. Fact 9. A bee can carry a load equal to about 60 to 80% of its own body weight. That's a colossal burden for a flying creature. And it repeats on every one of the thousands of flights in its lifetime. For comparison, a professional weightlifter lifts a barbell once and rests. A bee does its lift over and over every single day with no training and no breaks. Fact 10. A single hive holds between 40 and 80,000 bees. They're all descendants of one queen. But this isn't just a big family. Scientists increasingly describe the hive as a single living organism, where each individual bee is something like a cell. And here's the astonishing part. This organism can think. Fact 11. There's no commander in the hive. The queen doesn't manage the bees. She only lays eggs. No one gives orders. No one oversees the process from above. All decisions are made collectively, through chemical signals, vibrations, and behavioral patterns. Scientists call this swarm intelligence. Thousands of creatures with no central command make decisions more effectively than many organizations with multi-level hierarchies. Fact 12. When a hive searches for a new nesting site, scout bees literally vote on the options. Each bee that finds a suitable spot dances, and the better the spot, the longer and more intense her dance. Other bees watch, fly out to check, and if they agree, they start dancing too. The winner is the option that gets danced for the longest. This is genuine democracy. Hundreds of millions of years before humans even came up with the word. Fact 13. A bee navigates by the sun even on a cloudy day. It sees polarized light through the clouds, radiation that the human eye can't perceive at all. Thanks to this, the bee always knows exactly where the sun is, even if the sky is completely overcast. It's a built-in compass that works in any weather. Fact 14. The language of bees is dance, specifically the waggle dance. Through it, a bee simultaneously conveys three parameters: the direction to the nectar source, the distance to it, and the quality of the nectar itself. That's not a simplification. That's exactly how it works. One movement, three variables. Biologist Carl von Frisch decoded this language in the mid-20th century and won a Nobel Prize for it. Fact 15. The farther the nectar source, the longer the waggle portion of the dance. But here's the crucial part. Bees don't measure distance in meters or kilometers. They measure it in energy spent. 2 kilometers uphill and 2 kilometers on flat ground. For a bee, those are different distances. Their navigation system accounts for the terrain. Fact 16. Bees can recognize human faces. That's not a metaphor or anthropomorphizing. It's been proven experimentally. Bees don't just react to color or silhouette shape. They remember the face as a whole image, breaking it into parts and reassembling it into a single picture. The mechanism they use to do this is strikingly similar to the one we use. Fact 17. A bee can tell 3 objects from 4 and deliberately choose more or less. Experiments have shown confident counting up to 4. For a creature with a brain the size of a sesame seed, that's a remarkable result. A small brain doesn't mean primitive thinking. The bee proves it. Fact 18. Bees understand the concept of zero. Zero, as in less than 1. That's an abstraction long thought to be beyond every animal except primates and certain bird species. In 2018, scientists in Melbourne ran experiments and established that bees handle this task. They pick empty as the smallest value, something that technically isn't a number at all. Fact 19. Bees play. In 2022, researchers documented bees rolling small wooden balls, with no practical benefit to the hive, no reward, just for the sake of it. Younger bees did it far more often than older ones. This is the first documented play behavior in insects. Until then, play was considered a privilege of vertebrates. Fact 20. Bees sense a flower's electric field. A flower carries a negative charge. A bee carries a positive one. When a bee lands on a flower, the electric field around it changes. The next bee that flies up to that flower will detect the change and know someone's already been here. Flowers literally signal their cue to bees through electricity, invisible to everyone but them. Stop for a second. We've just reached fact 20, and we're not even at the halfway point yet. What comes next? The hive's inner workings, its winter survival, and something that genuinely gives you chills is far more interesting. Fact 21. The queen lays up to 2,000 eggs a day. That's roughly 1 egg every 40 seconds. No breaks, non-stop, for the entire active season. On peak days, she produces more eggs than her own body weight. The queen isn't a monarch in the usual sense. She's a living factory that never takes a day off. Fact 22. The queen lives up to 5 years. A worker bee lives 6 weeks. The difference in lifespan is enormous, but here's the crucial part. Genetically, there's no difference between them. The queen and the worker bee share the exact same set of chromosomes. The only difference is diet. From the larval stage, the queen is fed exclusively royal jelly, and that substance literally switches on a different developmental program. Food determines what you become, not genes. Fact 23. Royal jelly is produced by the worker bees themselves through special glands in their heads. It's not honey and it's not pollen. It's a separate substance that exists in nature for one purpose only, creating a queen. It's rich in proteins, fatty acids, and specific compounds that still aren't fully understood. One of them Royal actin. Triggers accelerated ovary development and extends lifespan. Fact 24. If the queen suddenly dies, the hive doesn't fall apart. Worker bees take an ordinary larva, no older than 3 days, move it into a special queen cell, and start feeding it royal jelly. 16 days later, that larva emerges as a fully functional queen. Fate isn't determined by birth but by circumstances. In the world of bees, that's literally true. Fact 25. A drone has no father. He hatches from an unfertilized egg. A phenomenon called parthenogenesis. A drone has a mother and a maternal grandfather, but no father in the usual sense of the word. From a genetic standpoint, this works perfectly normally, and that's exactly why scientists use bees to study how traits are inherited. Fact 26. A drone dies at the moment of mating, literally at that moment. His reproductive organ tears off and stays inside the queen's body. This isn't nature's cruelty, it's a precise biological design that ensures maximum transfer of genetic material. Evolution doesn't care about feelings, it cares about efficiency. Fact 27. The queen mates only once in her life. Within a few days of leaving the queen cell, she makes what's called a mating flight, and during that time, she mates with 10, sometimes even 20 drones. She stores a supply of sperm that will last for all 5 years of egg-laying. After that, the queen never leaves the hive again, unless she flies off with a swarm. Fact 28. In autumn, when the season winds down, worker bees drive the drones out of the hive. They just push them out and won't let them back in. Drones can't forage for food, can't sting, and can't generate heat on their own. Outside, with no stores and no shelter, they die within days. The hive doesn't feed those it no longer needs. That sounds harsh, but it's a completely rational survival strategy for the collective. Fact 29. When a hive gets too big, it splits. The old queen flies off with half the bees. That's the swarm. They hang in a tight cluster on a branch or a fence, while scout bees search for a new nesting site. At this moment, the swarm is completely docile. There's nothing to defend. There's no hive yet. People who see a swarm and panic don't know one simple fact: this is the safest form a bee colony can take. Fact 30. A swarm in the air, thousands of bees in a single cloud, looks terrifying, but it's precisely at this moment that bees sting the least. Before takeoff, every bee fills its honey crop, a special organ for carrying nectar, to the brim. That's its fuel for the journey. With a full belly, stinging is physically awkward. The abdomen is stretched out and can't bend properly. Nature built a truce right into the migration mechanism. And now, the big one, the whole reason a hive exists, and it's not honey. Fact 31. The main thing a bee does for the planet is not honey. Honey is a byproduct. The main thing is pollination. A third of the food on your table exists only because a bee carried pollen from flower to flower: almonds, apples, blueberries, cucumbers, pumpkins, cherries, avocados. Without the bee, none of that would exist. It wouldn't get cheaper. It just wouldn't exist. Fact 32. A single bee colony pollinates up to 300 million flowers in one season. That's not poetic exaggeration. That's a calculated figure. No other pollinator works on that scale. Bumblebees, hoverflies, butterflies, wind, all of them combined can't match what one colony of honeybees does in a single summer. Fact 33. In one foraging trip, a bee visits anywhere from 500 to 1,500 flowers. Then she returns to the hive, drops off her load, and heads out again. And she keeps going until her wings give out. Every single day, no exceptions. Fact 34. The global economic value of bee pollination is estimated at around $300 billion a year. That's more than the GDP of many countries. The bee does it for free, no invoice, no demands, asking nothing in return except the nectar the flowers produce anyway. Fact 35. Some crops can only be pollinated by one specific species of bee: red clover, only by bumblebees; vanilla in the wild, only by orchid bees of the genus Ulema, which live exclusively in Mexico and Central America. That's exactly why natural vanilla is so expensive. On plantations, pollination is done by hand, with a brush, flower by flower, by a human worker. Fact 36. A bee collects not just nectar, but pollen too. Pollen is the protein food for the larvae. She packs it into special baskets on her hind legs, called corbiculae. A bee coming home with bright yellow or orange pollen pants. That's her. Sometimes the baskets are white, blue, or brick red, depending on which flowers the pollen came from. Fact 37. By the color of the pollen in the baskets, an experienced beekeeper can tell where his colony is foraging. White, buckwheat. Bluish, cornflower. Brick red, poppy. It's a living map of roots that the bee carries on her body every time she comes home. Fact 38. Bees see the world completely differently than we do. They distinguish blue, violet, and ultraviolet best, a range the human eye can't perceive at all. Red looks roughly like black to a bee. That's why most flowers, pollinated by bees, are blue, yellow, and white. That's no accident. Flowers evolved alongside bees, and their coloring is advertising aimed directly at bee vision. Fact 39. A bee remembers roots. She knows where every familiar flower in her territory is, what time of day it opens, and when it holds the most nectar. This is called time memory, tied to the flower's schedule. The bee arrives at a flower exactly when it's at its most generous. Not a moment early, not a moment late. Fact 40. On a single foraging trip, a bee sticks to one plant species. If she set out for linden, she'll visit only linden, even if other nectar sources are blooming nearby. This is called flower constancy, and it's crucial for plants. The pollen lands on exactly the species that needs it, not the neighbor. Exactly there. But nectar and pollen aren't all a bee hauls back to the hive. Fact 41. Bees collect propolis, a resinous substance from tree buds and bark. In the hive, they use it to seal cracks, disinfect the walls, and, here's the truly astonishing part, entomb dead intruders that can't be dragged out. A mouse that gets into a hive and is killed there gets completely sealed in propolis, like in amber. The hive won't tolerate rot, and it solves the problem radically. Fact 42. Propolis is a powerful natural antiseptic. It suppresses the growth of bacteria, fungi, and viruses. The hive, despite its incredible population density, 40 to 80,000 individuals in a few square feet, remains one of the most sterile places in nature. And that's entirely thanks to propolis. Epidemics in hives are practically unheard of. Fact 43. Bees produce wax themselves from special glands on their abdomen. To produce 1 kilogram of wax, a bee must consume about 8 kilograms of honey. Building comb is a costly investment in terms of energy. That's why bees never build more than they need. Fact 44. The shape of a comb cell is a perfect hexagon. It's the mathematically optimal shape. It fills a plane with no gaps and requires the minimum amount of material for the walls while maximizing the cell's volume. Bees discovered and applied this principle hundreds of millions of years before mathematicians rigorously proved it. In the 17th century, the proof took several pages of formulas. A bee uses it instinctively. Fact 45. The comb is built vertically, but tilted at roughly 13 degrees. That exact angle is what keeps honey from leaking out of the cells before they're sealed. This isn't learned behavior, and it isn't calculation. It's an inborn precision built into the behavior of every worker bee. Fact 46. Honey is processed nectar. A bee collects nectar, adds enzymes from her own glands, and passes it to another bee. That one passes it to the next. This process repeats over and over. The nectar gets processed. Its composition changes. Moisture evaporates. Then the honey is placed into the comb and dried down to a moisture content below 18%. Only once the moisture hits the right level, the cell is sealed with a wax cap. Fact 47. It's the low moisture content that makes honey last forever. When the water content drops below 18%, bacteria physically can't multiply. The environment is simply too concentrated for them. Add to that the hydrogen peroxide produced by bee enzymes plus gluconic acid, and you get a product that, stored properly, doesn't spoil for millennia. That honey from Tutankhamun's tomb wasn't a fluke, it's just chemistry that bees mastered long before we did. Fact 48. Honey was used as an antiseptic long before antibiotics existed. In World War I, it was used to treat wounds right on the front lines, for lack of anything better, but with real results. Modern medicine has circled back to this practice. Medical-grade Manuka honey is officially used in clinics in several countries to treat chronic infected wounds, including bed sores and post-surgical complications. Fact 49. Bee venom, apitoxin, is being studied as a potential therapeutic agent for Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, and certain forms of arthritis. Clinical trials are ongoing, and the results so far are preliminary. Science hasn't drawn any final conclusions yet, but the very fact is remarkable. A substance that can kill a person with an allergy may, in microdoses, have an anti-inflammatory effect. Fact 50. We're halfway there, and we haven't even talked about how bees survive the winter, which is an incredible story in itself. We haven't talked about why hives around the world started emptying out in 2006. And we haven't talked about what scientists discovered in bee behavior that completely upended entomology's understanding of consciousness in insects. Let's keep going. Fact 51. In winter, bees don't hibernate. They keep living, and they keep warm. The whole cluster, several thousand bees, tightens into a dense ball and starts vibrating their flight muscles in sync. Inside that ball, the temperature holds at around 27 degrees, even when it's -30 outside. It's a living thermostat that runs without a single heater, without fuel, and without any outside command. Fact 52. Bees in a winter cluster are constantly moving. Those on the outer edge, starting to get cold, gradually work their way toward the center. Those warmed up inside move out to the surface. It's an organized rotation with no one giving orders. Nobody freezes longer than their turn. Nobody hogs the warm spot indefinitely. Fact 53. All winter long, bees never leave the hive to relieve themselves. Not once. They hold it in until the first warm day, which can be months away. The first spring flight is called the cleansing flight. The bee literally flies out, does her business midair, and comes back. It's a physiologically documented record of endurance among insects, and it sounds both hilarious and awe-inspiring at the same time. Fact 54. If winter drags on and the honey stores run low, the hive makes a brutal call. The queen is pushed out of the warm center of the cluster to the edge. There, she dies of cold first. It sounds like betrayal, but it's actually cold, hard math. Without food, new eggs would only hasten the death of the entire colony. The survival of the group outweighs any single individual, even the queen. Fact 55. In spring, the hive wakes up before the trees even bloom. The queen starts laying eggs when it's only about 10 degrees above freezing, long before the first flowers appear. Bees prepare for the season in advance, as if they know hard work lies ahead and want to meet it fully battle-ready. Fact 56. In a bee's abdomen, scientists have found crystals of magnetite, the same mineral migratory birds use to navigate by Earth's magnetic field. It's believed this lets a bee sense its orientation in space without relying on the sun or polarized light. Research into this mechanism is still ongoing, but the presence of magnetite in bees is confirmed. Fact 57. Bees sense the weather coming. A few hours before a thunderstorm, flight activity drops sharply. Bees stream back to the hive, and they get noticeably more irritable. Beekeepers know this as a practical rule of thumb. If a bee is angry from early morning, expect rain by evening. What exactly triggers it? Changes in pressure, humidity, or the electric field hasn't been fully determined. Fact 58. Several independent studies have recorded abnormal behavior in bee colonies in the hours before earthquakes. Bees get restless and break their usual flight rhythm. The mechanism behind this isn't understood yet, but the correlation has been documented consistently enough to catch the attention of seismologists. Fact 59. Sound inside the hive carries information. Bees communicate not only through dance and chemical signals, but also through vibrations that travel directly through the comb. Wax is an excellent conductor of sound. The hive is a living acoustic instrument, where different frequencies mean different things: alarm, readiness to fly, a shift in work mode. Fact 60. The queen makes a distinctive sound, something like a short piping noise that beekeepers call quacking. Young queens, still inside their queen cells, answer her with a different sound, tooting. It's a dialogue. The old queen signals, "I'm here, I'm alive," and the young ones answer, "We're ready." The first one to emerge from her cell immediately kills the rest, right through the cell walls. The winner of this contest is decided by speed. And now, the part that truly sends a chill down your spine. Fact 61. Starting in 2006, bees began to disappear. Not die, disappear. Beekeepers would open their hives and find them empty. The honey is there, the larvae are there, the queen is there, But the bees are gone. They simply flew off and never came back. No dead bodies near the hive. No traces at all. This phenomenon came to be known as colony collapse disorder, and to this day, it has no full explanation. Fact 62. In the first winter after the syndrome was discovered, American beekeepers lost anywhere from 30 to 90% of their colonies. In some states, nearly everything, in a single season. This wasn't a gradual decline, it was a disappearance. Fast, massive, and unexplained. Fact number 63. The cause still hasn't been confirmed. The main suspects, neonicotinoid pesticides, the varroa mite, viruses, fungi, loss of flowering plant diversity. Most likely, all of the above at once. Science leans toward a multi-factor hypothesis, but there's still no single answer. It's one of the most troubling open questions in modern biology. Fact number 64. The varroa mite is the biggest scourge of modern beekeeping. It attaches to a bee and feeds on its fat body, the organ responsible for immunity, overwintering, and producing nutrients for larvae. An infected bee lives shorter, flies worse, survives winter poorly, and passes viruses to its offspring. Varroa arrived in European beekeeping in the 70s of the last century, and hasn't retreated a single step since. Fact number 65. Neonicotinoids are the most widely used class of pesticides in the world. They don't kill a bee instantly. They disrupt its navigation. A treated bee flies out of the hive and can't find its way home. It doesn't die in the field, it just never comes back. That's exactly what explains empty hives with untouched stores. The bees went out looking for nectar and got lost. Fact number 66. In 2018, the European Union banned 3 major neonicotinoids for use on open fields. Some countries went further and introduced broader restrictions. Others didn't. Pesticide manufacturers still dispute the proven link between their products and bee deaths. Lawsuits are ongoing. Fact number 67. Over the last 30 years, the population of wild pollinators in Europe has dropped by roughly a third. It's not just honeybees, bumblebees, solitary bees, hoverflies, certain butterfly species. Entire groups are vanishing faster than scientists can study and describe them. Fact number 68. If bees disappear, so will the plants that depend entirely on their pollination. If those plants disappear, so will the animals that feed on them. This isn't some apocalyptic sci-fi scenario. It's basic ecology. The chain is short, the links are direct, and a break at any point ripples through the whole system. Fact number 69. Albert Einstein is often credited with the quote, "If the bee disappears from the face of the earth, man will live no more than 4 years." He never said it. That quote doesn't appear in any of his documented writings or recordings. But people want to believe it so badly that it's been alive for half a century, hopping from book to book. That fact alone says a lot. We instinctively feel our dependence, even when we can't explain it. Fact number 70. Despite all this, beekeeping worldwide is growing. The number of managed hives has increased over the last 20 years. People are keeping bees on city rooftops, in schoolyards, at industrial sites. The bee has become a symbol of environmental awareness, and it's genuinely changing cities, bringing back wildflower meadows and hedgerows instead of asphalt. Fact number 71. Humans have been hunting for honey for at least 8,000 years. In Spain's Cueva de la Araña cave, there are rock paintings depicting a person climbing up a cliff to a wild hive. In their hands, a basket. Around them, a swarm. The paintings are about 8,000 years old. Everything is recognizable. Everything is clear without words. Fact number 72. The first domesticated bees appeared in ancient Egypt about 4,000 years ago. The Egyptians kept hives made of clay tubes and transported them by boat along the Nile, following the bloom. It was migratory beekeeping. When one set of fields finished flowering, the hives were loaded onto a barge and taken, where flowering was just beginning. That practice still exists today, only now it's trucks instead of barges. Fact number 73. In ancient Egypt, honey was currency. People paid taxes with it, offered it to the gods, presented it to pharaohs. The honey from Tutankhamun's tomb, not a random find. It was a deliberate gift for the afterlife, one of the most precious things you could place beside a dead king. Fact number 74. In ancient Greece, honey was considered food of the gods. According to myth, baby Zeus was hidden on the island of Crete, and wild bees fed him honey. In Greek culture, the bee was a sacred animal, linked to prophecy, immortality, and the soul. The priestesses of Apollo's temple at Delphi bore the name Melissae, bees. Fact number 75. The phrase honeymoon comes from ancient northern traditions. Newlyweds were given a supply of honey for exactly 1 lunar month after the wedding. It was believed that daily honey consumption would ensure fertility and happiness for the couple. Mead, an intoxicating drink made from honey, was a mandatory part of the wedding ritual. Fact number 76. Mead is humanity's oldest alcoholic beverage. Traces of a drink made from honey and wild yeast have been found in clay vessels about 9,000 years old, in burial sites in what is now China. That's older than beer and older than wine. The first thing humans ever fermented was mead. Fact number 77. In medieval Europe, monasteries were centers of beekeeping. Wax was essential for church candles, and that made the bee part of the religious economy. Monks perfected hive technology, developed recipes for herbal honey drinks, and created varieties of tinctures still produced under monastic brands today. Fact number 78. Napoleon Bonaparte chose the bee as his personal symbol. Not an eagle, not a lion, a bee. Golden bees were embroidered on his coronation robe. For him, it was a symbol of industriousness, organization, and the immortality of power. The choice wasn't random. In the tomb of the Frankish king Childeric, discovered in the 17th century, 300 golden bees were found, and Napoleon deliberately claimed this ancient symbol for himself. Fact number 79. In Russian, the word for bee comes from a Proto-Slavic root meaning to buzz. The same is true in most European languages. The name of this creature is onomatopoeic, everywhere. People named it after its sound long before they learned how to domesticate it. Fact number 80. The bee appears on the coats of arms and flags of dozens of cities and regions around the world. Manchester, Milan, Tashkent, everywhere it's the same symbol: hard work, order, collective strength. No other insect has ever received such heraldic recognition. The bee is the only insect humanity has consistently deemed worthy of its symbols. 20 facts left, and among them are a few that will change how you look at everything that came before. Fact number 81. The bee sees the world in slow motion. It perceives about 300 frames per second, compared to 24 for a human. What looks like a fast movement to us is almost a freeze frame to a bee. That's why swatting a bee with your palm is practically impossible. It sees your hand long before you finish your swing. Fact number 82. The bee is not aggressive by nature. It only stings when it feels a real threat, to itself or to the hive. Solitary bees, the 20,000 species without hives, sting extremely rarely. Most of them physically cannot pierce human skin at all. The vast majority of cases where a bee attacked started with a sudden movement or an attempt to catch it. Fact number 83. A worker bee stings only once and dies. Its stinger is equipped with barbs that get stuck in mammalian skin. When it pulls away, the bee loses its stinger along with part of its abdomen and digestive tract. It's a death sentence, but here's what's important to know. The detached stinger keeps pumping venom for several seconds after it's torn off. That's why you need to remove it immediately. Not with your fingers, but with a fingernail or a card, scraping it sideways, not squeezing it out. Fact number 84. A bumblebee stings without dying. Its stinger is smooth, without barbs. A wasp's is too. Only the honeybee pays with its life for stinging a human. On other insects or animals with thin chitinous shells, the barbs don't get stuck, and the bee survives. This tragedy happened because its stinger evolved to defend against other insects, not against creatures with skin. Fact number 85. The scent of venom released during a sting is an alarm signal for the entire hive. Other bees smell it and immediately come to the rescue. That's why a single sting near the hive can instantly escalate into a mass attack. This isn't malice or aggression. It's a chemical warning system working exactly as evolution intended. Fact number 86. Bees recognize their hive by smell. Each colony has a unique scent, a kind of chemical password. The guards at the entrance check every incoming bee. They sniff it. A foreign bee with a different scent will be stopped and attacked. It's border control based purely on chemistry. No documents, no visual recognition, but with 0% error under normal conditions. Fact number 87. A bee can learn by watching other bees. In experiments, bees observed their fellow bees pulling a string for a reward, and then repeated the action on their own, without any prior training. Social learning in insects was long considered impossible. Bees disproved that assumption experimentally. Fact number 88. A bee has 5 eyes, 2 large compound eyes on the sides of its head, for a wide panoramic view, and 3 small, simple eyes on the top of its head. They detect light intensity and direction, help maintain the horizon in flight, and navigate by the sun. 2 fundamentally different types of vision working simultaneously. Compared to that, the human eye is a fairly modest piece of equipment. Fact number 89. A bee's sense of smell is about 1,000 times sharper than a human's. It can detect the scent of nectar from several kilometers away. This very quality made the bee unexpectedly useful in one completely non-obvious field. Bees are trained to find landmines. They detect traces of explosives by smell, more accurately and faster than many technical devices. These are active programs in several countries, not an experiment. Fact number 90. A bee colony only makes the decision to move to a new home with full consensus. If the scout bees haven't reached an agreement, the swarm keeps hanging and waiting, sometimes for days. Without unanimity, there's no movement. No majority vote, no compromises, only complete agreement. Human democracies took much longer to reach that standard of decision-making. And even then, not everywhere. 10 facts left. The last one, you'll definitely remember it. Fact number 91. Honey is the only food product produced by an animal that requires no processing before consumption. Take it out of the hive. It's ready. No need to cook it, sterilize it, or add preservatives. 3,000 years of technological progress all around, and the product itself hasn't changed by a single molecule. Fact number 92. In 1 teaspoon of honey, nectar from about 2,000 flowers. Think about that next time you're stirring honey into your tea. A tiny spoon, 2,000 visits, dozens of kilometers of flight. Fact number 93. A bee never sleeps the way we do. It falls into short periods of stillness lasting a few minutes, without fully shutting down consciousness. Young bees sleep erratically at different times. Older, experienced foragers gradually synchronize with each other and start resting at roughly the same time. As a bee ages, it develops a daily routine. Fact number 94. Bees have been to space. In 1984, NASA placed a beehive aboard an orbital shuttle as part of mission STS-41C. In zero gravity, bees built honeycombs, almost perfect ones, with slight geometric deviations. The building instinct proved stronger than the absence of gravity. The bees built because they don't know any other way. Fact number 95. There are 20,000 species of bees in the world, and 20,000 different solutions to the same survival problem. In New Zealand, there's a carpenter bee that nests in wood and produces no honey at all. In Australia, there's a bee that builds its nests from flower petals. In South America, a stingless bee that guards the hive entrance with a layer of resin so sticky that enemies literally get glued in place. One problem, 20,000 answers. Fact number 96. In its lifetime, a single worker bee flies an average of about 800 kilometers. That's the distance from Moscow to St. Petersburg, there and back twice, in 6 weeks, carrying cargo, no overnight stops, no days off. Fact number 97. Scientists at the University of Queensland proved that bees can be optimistic or pessimistic, depending on their living conditions. A bee from a healthy, well-kept hive, when faced with an uncertain situation, chooses the positive course of action. A bee from a stressed hive chooses the negative one. Emotional states in insects. It sounds unbelievable, but this very finding turned entomology's understanding of what can actually happen inside an insect's nervous system on its head. Fact number 98. A bee can smell blooming linden from a kilometer away. That's why, on the day the city lindens bloom, the streets fill with bees. They swarm in from everywhere, from the whole surrounding area. One mature tree on a good day receives several thousand visits. The city has plenty of lindens, so it has plenty of bees. Fact number 99. The bee is the only insect whose product is eaten by the entire world. Every culture, every continent, every era, honey has united humanity longer than any religion, any language, or any state. It's the one thing that an Egyptian pharaoh, a medieval peasant, and a 21st century person all ate, with no change to the recipe. Fact number 100. That very bee you shoo away from your glass of juice in the summer, in its short life, it will pollinate several thousand flowers, produce 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey, fly hundreds of kilometers, work every single day until its final flight, which happens right there in midair. It doesn't know it's doing something important, it just does it, every day, until the end. Honey from Tutankhamun's tomb sat for 3,200 years and remained edible. This isn't just chemistry, it's the result of 100 million years of evolution of a creature that most of us only notice when it's buzzing right by our ear. Now you know what it really is.